high priest who puts forth dogma that can never be questioned. That's simply not how academia works, and no scholar would say that once they speak, no student can ever ask questions or raise objections or investigate the matter for themselves. Again, that's not how academia works. Whatever the case, because a number of the supporters of Richardson and Brown kept asking me where my scholars are, or which scholars I had reached out to, I decided that, if they insist, I can at least send out a few emails to a few different professors. And that's what I did. To each professor I wrote to, I sent 2 images. The first image I attached was of this particular pew from this angle. As you might have noticed, this is precisely the pew Kelly Richardson and I gave competing interpretations for, as I offered a hypothetical Arabic interpretation of the markings, and he offered a Solitreo interpretation. This is covered in detail in my previous video. The second image which I attached to each email was this one, which is the same pew, just with some highlights added to guide the eyes, so to speak. Along with those images, I sent each professor the exact same email text, which read as follows, quote, "Forgive the intrusion of this email. In Savannah, Georgia, USA, there is a church, First African Baptist Church, which has pews which were built by slaves. On the outside of the pews which those slaves built are a number of markings. Some have claimed that the markings might be Hebrew, and others have claimed that the markings might be Arabic. Recently, someone has suggested that one pew might even have material from the Quran, but the person who made that suggestion is not any sort of expert in Quranic Arabic. I am writing to ask if you might offer some insight here. I have attached 2 images. The first image simply shows a pew unhighlighted. The second image shows the same pew with highlights as part of one person's attempt to elucidate what might be there. Nota bene, the portion on the right in the second image is in a different color because one person suggested that it might be the end of a different sentence? Arabic. Could you tell me if in your opinion that looks to you or to any of your colleagues like it could be Hebrew, or if it looks like it could be Arabic, and if it might be the latter, if there is any possibility of it resembling anything in the Quran, and if you feel there might be any discernible language in the markings, whether Hebrew or Arabic or something else, are you or anyone you know able to suggest a possible translation? Apologies again for the intrusion. Thanks in advance for any help in this matter. Sincerely, AA." End quote. So I received multiple replies, and the first email that I'd like to show is the reply I received from Samar Ali, professor of Arabic at the University of Michigan.
Now, notice he says the doctor, this is an actual professor. There go a heading, right? You got date and time. He says, "Dear Adele," right? "Thanks for reaching out. And this is a super interest. It looks like Arabic in the West African script, and it could very well be a 3-word snippet of chapter 114, right, of the Quran." I think that's a comma, "which nearly every Muslim would know and use for a ritual, period. I can't be certain without more context, comma, but it looks like I can't pronounce that, humanity, the God of humanity, from the middle of this chapter, period," right? And he goes in, he gives some citation, and then he goes into the rest of what he was going to say. "Kind regards, Samar." Now, he didn't put all of that doctor, PhD, and all this other stuff. He don't have to make that statement because you already know who he is, due to what? You already looked him up. So the doctor don't have to do all of that. And I don't think Professor M.D. David Boonis did all of that either. But keep going, because there's another example.
Response reads as follows, quote, "Thanks for reaching out, and this is super interesting. It looks like Arabic in the West African script, and it could very well be a 3-word snippet of chapter 114 of the Quran, which nearly every Muslim would know and use for ritual prayer. I can't be certain without more context, but it looks like Al-Nas, Ilahil Nas, humanity, the God of humanity, from the middle of that chapter. The whole text of chapter 114 is very short. In the name of God, merciful to all, compassionate to each, I seek refuge with the Lord of humanity, the King of humanity, the God of humanity, who whispers in the hearts of humanity, of jinn and humanity." Besides prayer, it's used in stressful or frightening situations to summon God's protection. Let me know if I can be of any further help. End quote. So while this professor, Samar Ali, said he is not certain, he does say that it looks like it could be a
Pause
West
again,
African
Kevin.
rendering of a
Hold
few
on.
words from the last
Remember
chapter of the
what you
Quran.
said about those holes in the flow. The Bon-Congo Congolese diagram is a Pan-African spiritualism for what? For prayer and what? Protection. Ain't it funny that this doctor is linking with that? That's why I said the whole church tells a story. Okay? Look at what he's saying. The whole text of 114 is very short. I seek refuge of the Lord of humanity. That would make sense if these slaves are on the run. In the name of God, merciful to all, compassionate to each, the King of humanity, the God of humanity, who whispers in the hearts of humanity, of jinn and humanity, right? Besides prayer, it is used in a stressful or frightening situation to summon God's what? Protection. Let me know if I can be of any further help. That diagram that is in them holes in the flow, that's what that represents. If this is actual Arabic dialect.
Right. And what will make sense to that also is that if this was in fact, which it was, a place for the Underground Railroad where slaves ran away to, this could have been their only written language that they used to convey their conversion to Christianity.
Yes.
By saying, okay, we know this is a Christian church, but we're writing this verse as close as we can to summon God's protection or pray for that protection while we're there.
Right.
So it was a familiarity among the slaves, it seems, to come there and be there for protection, to pray with the Congolese cosmogram and ask for God protection in that Christian church.
Right. And it's not that far, it's not far-fetched. Why? Because this didn't start at transatlantic slave trade. We got to go back to the trans-Saharan slave trade. So that Muslim I don't want to say Muslim culture, but that Muslim spirituality, if you want to say, is already flowing through Africa. It's been flowing through Africa since what? Mid-6th or 7th century. So this is not far-fetched at all. But keep going. Makes a lot of sense.
On precisely the chapter I had appealed to when I proposed an Arabic reading for this pew. Also worthy of note, his point that this text was memorized and recited in particular by those in stressful or frightening situations could loan itself well to the idea of this being a text which certain slaves had memorized. Now let me show you another couple of emails, with a more, in particular one with a more definitive answer. This one is from Geoffrey Kahn, who is the current Regius Professor of Hebrew at Cambridge in England. The Regius Professor, or Regius if you want, you can say Regius. The Regius Professorship of Hebrew at Cambridge is a Hebrew chair established.
Notice again, Brother Kevin G. We got his whole name. Mm-hmm. We got his email, but of course, Abu blocked it out. That's okay. We got date, time, right? Who is to, and he's approaching him with, Dear Adele, thank you very much for your message and for the photos of the pews in Savannah. The writing is Arabic and contains verses 2 and 3 from the final chapter of Surah of the Quran. The text visible in the photo reads, the Arabic sovereign of mankind, the God of mankind, same as the last email with the other professor. When do you think this was written on the pews? Now, they said that those pews was back into the 1800s. So slavery is still going on. Slavery didn't end to 1865? So when do you think this was written on the pews? Was it written by the slaves who built it? Best wishes, Geoffrey. I hope I said his name right. If I did,
it's Jeffrey. It's Geoffrey Kahn. He appears to be a. His family is probably second or third generation. He's probably second or third generation Arab that lives in the UK. I think his culture is fully British. But check this out. I looked him up. He's legit. Did you know he got his award for honorary doctorates in Hebrew University in Jerusalem in 2017?
But he didn't go through all of that, putting PhD, doctor this, and all this other stuff.
Well, right. I mean, that's not. But if you look at his page on Cambridge University, I'm not going to show it because it has his picture and stuff.
That's fine.
You
We
actually
already got
see,
his picture. We already
yeah,
got
yeah.
it.
I mean, you will see that this guy actually he knows, and he's an expert on Shemitic languages. He off the bat translated the same thing Abu said and the first professor said, that this is the writing from verses 2 and 3 in the final chapter of the Surah of Quran, the sovereign mankind, the God of mankind. Or in other words, the first one said the sovereign of humanity, the God of humanity, saying the same thing.
I wonder if we could look at that in the Quran.
Sure, I'll look it up. I mean, no. Which already brought it out.
That was
He already brought it out.
Did he? Not on this video. It's the first video.
On the other video, he did bring it out. And you know what? When you look at that video, it's the exact writing that's on the pews. It's the exact writing. I'll pull it up right here.
No problem.
Let's do this.
Wow. Yep, right there.
Okay, so this is the one here, right? So
to highlight those two little lines and interpret them as an alif lam, the definite article on.
So notice here,
the word nas.
This writing, you have the 3 lines, this mark, the W going through this line, and the curve. This is that surah. So if you look at this, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. And the professors translate it as being the same. So let's go back here.
Couple of
you want to keep playing it?
With a more, in particular, one with a more definitive answer. This one is from Geoffrey Kahn, who is the current Regius Professor of Hebrew at Cambridge in England. The Regius Professor, or Regius if you want, you can say Regius. The Regius Professorship of Hebrew at Cambridge is a Hebrew chair established by the King of England 480 years ago. So this is a serious Hebraist, and he also studies and teaches Arabic. So Professor Khan's initial reply to my email was as follows, quote, "Thank you very much for your message and for the photos of the pews in Savannah. The writing is Arabic and contains verses 2 and 3 from the final chapter or surah of the Quran. The text visible in the photo reads in Arabic, sovereign of mankind, the God of mankind. When do you think this was written on the pews? Was it written by the slaves who built it? Best wishes, Geoffrey," end quote. So I wrote back to Professor Khan with the following, quote, "Greetings, Professor Khan. Thank you very much for your reply. Regarding your question, I do not know for certain when the markings were made. The only thing I have is the church's oral tradition, which posits that the same slaves who made the pews were the ones who made those markings. Ergo, assuming that is correct, the markings would date to the 1850s. I really appreciate you sharing your conclusion regarding what appears in those markings. Forgive me if this question is somewhat redundant, but just to be clear, would you say it is definitely Arabic and not Hebrew? The context of my question is the alternate suggestions which have floated around, some positing that the markings should be Arabic and others positing that the markings should be Hebrew. Sincerely, AA," end quote. In response to that, Professor Khan wrote a second reply, which read in part as follows, quote, "The writing is clearly Arabic and is clearly from the Quran, the final surah, Surat al-Nas. It is certainly not Hebrew," end quote. Now, seeing how Richardson, Brown, and others treated the alleged positions of Bunis and Katz, can you imagine how they would react if Cambridge's Hebrew chair said that the markings are clearly Hebrew and certainly not Arabic? I think we can all agree that they would declare that the debate is finished and the matter is closed. So this begs the question, now that I have an email from Cambridge's Regius Professor of Hebrew saying that the markings are clearly Arabic and certainly not Hebrew, should I play the same game? Should I say that the debate is closed and that mere students cannot say anything in response? Of course not. The reason why is because, as I said, that is not how academia works. No scholar would want me going around telling people that they cannot ask questions, or that they cannot raise objections, or that they cannot investigate the matter for themselves. This email does not have to end the discussion, and it especially should not be a tool, used to try to silence students of language. And, to drive this point home, let me share a third email. This one is from Mohsen Goodarzi, an assistant professor of Near Eastern Studies at the University of Minnesota. His email takes a different approach. His email reads in part as follows.
See, now, that's a signature down there. That is a signature. If you're going to put a signature in your email, that's the proper way of doing it.
Exactly. Now, this one got Moshe
Goodarzi. I think he's going to pronounce it for us. But
okay. Assistant professor, Department of Classical and Near Eastern Studies, Religious Study Program, University of Minnesota, 266 Nicholas Hall. He giving you the whole and
give the whole shebang. I'm gonna hear what this guy got to say.
Okay.
Thank you for your email. I've looked at the images carefully, and I don't believe they contain Arabic writing. Now, it is not impossible for the markings to represent a highly cursive, idiosyncratic, and/or local form of Arabic script. Someone with expertise in West African Islam could be a better judge of this. Nor is it impossible to read into them certain recognizable phrases from the Quran. I can read into them 2 phrases, in fact. But these would constitute imposition of a text upon the markings, which can be done basically with any set of sufficiently complex traces. End quote. Now, I imagine at this point, some might be thinking, wait, what? Why would you share that email? You should have ended it with the email from the professor at Cambridge. But I would prefer that we at least try to be somewhat intellectually honest. Moreover, I think Professor Goodarzi's email is helpful. There is a real possibility of an imaginative mind making connections based on familiar features and patterns while looking at something which is actually random or naturally occurring. And one can read up on, things like pareidolia and apophenia for more on this possibility. Finally, let's be honest. What sorts of replies we might get from certain professors can also be influenced by what precise images are shown, how those images are highlighted, and how the questions are worded. So there are multiple layers of interpretation and influence at play in these exercises. For example, try writing to different professors with this image without any highlights, noting that some claim...
Hey, this is the one that we was going through before. I said, this don't make no sense right here. I don't know what this is all about. Let me go. I keep going on this one.
Hebrew appears on the pew and others claim Arabic appears on the pew, while also clearly saying up front that one other possibility is that these are just random or naturally occurring markings, like medullary rays or scratches, made at random. I think we all know that we're unlikely to get too many replies declaring that to clearly be Hebrew or Arabic if that approach is taken. On that note, I hope everyone enjoyed this discussion on the recent appeals to scholars, and I really am looking forward to the comments of others, and I'm looking forward to see where this discussion goes from here. On that note, God bless.
God bless you too, Abu. So we broke this down. And found, well, I'm sure that they are probably already knew, Kevin G. We just brought it out some more. These people just lied.
Yeah.
Mr. Boom needs to go sit down somewhere and takes the rest of your cronies with you.